Hello everybody and welcome to the video. As some of you know, I recently picked up the F-5 module for DCS World and I've been having quite a lot of fun with it. And although I'm certainly not a master at this module, I do think I've progressed beyond the absolutely awful new player stage. And so I thought I'd just like to share 10 tips with you that I wish that I had known before taking this module online for the first time. Now, this is certainly not going to be an exhaustive list, and it is certainly not sort of master level. More, this is for people who are in the same situation as me. They've just picked up the F5, they've gone through the tutorials, and they want to take it out for their first time, but just want a few extra tips here and there. At the same time, I am going to be assuming that you have gone through the in-game tutorials or looked through YouTube tutorial equivalents, so you know how to turn on the plane, how the basic systems work. I won't be going over any of that here. So without further ado, let's jump to the first tip. So the first few tips are all about handling the fragility of the F5's wings. These things love to snap. And honestly, I have died more to snapping my own wings off than I have to R60s. And I know this isn't just me. I've seen new players and experienced players alike having this issue. And you've probably seen this if you've been flying on Cold War servers. You see F5s coming back quite a lot with the tips of both wings missing. And this isn't always a fatal problem. The F5 flies weirdly well without its wingtips, but sometimes it is very, very fatal, and generally it's not advisable. So let's try and avoid ripping chunks of our plane off. And the easiest way to do this is just never to roll and pitch at the same time. You want to do those separately. So if you're trying to do a turn, roll completely first, then return the stick to neutral, then pull the stick back. Never have your stick pulled fully back at a diagonal. That's when you rip your wings. And sure, this means you might lose the edge in a fight, but it's better to lose your chance at a gun solution than it is to lose your things keeping you in the air. So the F5 does have systems in place to help you stop ripping your own wings and doing other things like over-maneuvering on takeoff. These are the roll and pitch dampeners. You'll find these on the left-hand console between the throttle and the countermeasures controls, and it's really worthwhile turning these on. Do note that the auto start does not turn these on by default, so whether you're starting up yourself or using auto start, do look over and flip these on before takeoff. Now, these will limit your ability to maneuver in combat, since they do put limits on the amount of pitch that you can attain. But you can disable this with a one-button push called Disable Dampeners, and so you can use that in combat if you really need to and you're confident that you're not going to rip the wings doing so. So if you're not confident, when can you turn off dampeners? Well, the number that I've been quoted by a lot of sources is 450 knots. Above 450 knots is when you're in the danger area for snapping your wings. Below 450 knots, you should be fine. At least the wing snapping is much, much less likely at those speeds. So keep an eye on your speed. If you're maneuvering at high speed, then just err on the side of safety. Maybe just leave the dampeners on. Okay, so you're not maneuvering above 450 knots with the dampeners off, but what speed should you be maneuvering at? Well, the F5 turns best at between 350 and 400 knots, and you can be really very competitive at turn fighting when you're in that speed regime. One thing to look out for, though, is if you do dip below 350 knots, the F5 is not the best at regaining speed. It can go fast, but it takes ages to get there. So do keep an eye on your speed and only really try and pull your enemy into the HUD if you're really sure you're going to get that missile away or get that gun solution. Now, one of the biggest things that threw me coming from more modern planes, such as the F-18, is the radar on the F-5. It really is not a modern-day radar. It is really not used for finding targets. That's what your good old Mark 1 eyeball is for. The radar on the F-5 is really for giving you an accurate guns solution. Finding targets, you're going to visibly see them long before the radar picks them up. If they're against the sky, then you should see that black dot in plenty of time. If they're against the ground, well, then the radar is going to lose them in ground clutter anyway. So keep your radar off unless you're already in close and you want to use the radar gun sight. Otherwise, all it's going to do is transmit your exact azimuth to every single hostile plane in the area. So keep it on standby until you're ready to go in for guns. When it comes to jettisoning your fuel tanks prior to combat, it's a good idea to use the Jettison All and Jettison buttons in turn, these ones here. You can use the big emergency jettison button. Problem is that won't jettison the pylons, those will be left behind. If you use the Jettison All button and hold down the jettison button, it will jettison both the tank and any pylon, really giving you a clean profile for combat. If you have the controls bound, it really doesn't take that long. And don't worry, Jettison All will not drop your missiles, they will stay attached. And just a brief addition to the last one, when you do use Jettison All, do not leave that switch in the down position, otherwise your missiles will not work. You need to flip it back up into the neutral position. Apparently this is also the case with the rotary to select rockets and bombs. That needs to be in the off position. But I have been able to fire missiles with that rotary in the rockets position, so I'm not entirely sure why that is. But just to be safe, keep that in the off position as well. There's nothing worse than getting a perfect missile opportunity and the damn thing not coming off the rail. Speaking of things to do in preparation for combat, make sure that all your weapon systems are completely armed and ready long before you get into combat. Ideally, I do this on the runway or just when starting up. That means master arm on, select both your missiles, and have the sight rotary set to the missile position. There's quite a few things to do. You really don't want to end up doing this when you've got a MiG in your sight. I know there are some people who say you shouldn't have master arm on when you're on the ground, but I have never launched a missile on the ground accidentally. I have gone into combat with master arm off, so I'll just stick with my option. One other thing that got me going from more modern jets is the AIM-9 P5s are not as good as modern AIM-9s, such as the AIM-9X. So don't expect them to work miracles, don't expect them to turn on the spot or have perfect tracking. So ideally you want to be aiming right at the enemy's six with a decent lead between you and them to give your missile the best time. And ideally pull a good amount of lead with the uncage button held down. That said, it is worth noting that the AIM-9 P5 can do all aspects to a certain degree, and it's pretty damn good at head-ons, and so it's certainly worth a shot there. An awful lot of my kills have been head-ons. Even MiG-21s can have issues head-oning a F-5. And lastly, a little bit of an odd one. This is mostly coming from World War II planes, but make sure that you never come to a complete stop on the ground or snow unless you really, really want to stay where you are. The landing gear will get stuck. Fine on tarmacs, they're fine on roads, they're fine on the runway, but the moment you come to a stop on soil, you are as good as dead in the water. Now you can move across soft ground as long as you keep your speed up. And mostly this is a problem with things like road bases or crowded runways where someone has gone AFK on the one little strip of tarmac in front of you. You quickly think, okay, that's fine, I'll just go around them. Don't quite have enough speed, come to a stop, and that is your sortie over. Seemingly an odd tip, maybe a minor tip, but it's something that's caught me out on more than one occasion, so just wanted to share it with all of you. So those are my 10 beginners tips for the F5. If you found this useful, do leave a like down below, and please do share your own tips in the comments. There is plenty more out there that I have left out of this, and there is even more out there that I don't know yet about the F5. Until next time, have fun in the Tiger. I'll catch you there. Cheers.